The darkness of space held many secrets, but none were as deadly as the one floating in the shadow of Jupiter's largest moon. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of humanity's greatest creation, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. The ship around him was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 15 kilometers of pure destruction wrapped in metal that seemed to eat light itself. They called her Rose, and she was about to change everything. Jake had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. 20 years since the aliens first came to Earth and told humanity they were nothing special. 20 years since the Galactic Coalition decided that humans were too young, too stupid, and too dangerous to join their perfect society. 20 years of watching human colonies suffer, while alien races enjoyed technologies that could save millions of lives. The Coalition was made up of 3 main powers. The Vorthak Empire looked like living crystals and thought they were better than everyone else because they had been around for millions of years. The Zelen Collective was a hive mind that treated individual thoughts like a disease. The Arcturian Federation had the best technology and used it to control trade routes across half the galaxy. All 3 groups agreed on one thing: humanity should stay in their little corner of space and be quiet. But humans had never been good at being quiet. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked onto the bridge, her boots clicking against the metal floor. She had gray hair now, but her eyes still burned with the fire that had started this whole project. Kate had been there when the Coalition refused to help during the Kepler crisis. She had watched 3 million humans die from a plague that alien medicine could have cured in days. The Coalition said it was not their problem, and flew away. That was when Kate decided to build the Rose. Dr. Alex Carter followed behind the Admiral, carrying a datapad that showed power levels throughout the massive ship. Alex had designed the quantum drives that made Rose possible. The drives could bend space and time, letting the ship move faster than light without using the jump gates that the aliens controlled. More importantly, the drives could do things that made alien scientists wake up screaming. Engineer Lisa Beck was already at her station, running final checks on the weapon systems. Lisa had spent 15 years designing guns that could unmake atoms and cannons that could create black holes. The aliens thought they knew everything about physics, but humans had learned to break the rules. The bridge crew was small but highly trained. Communications officer Danny Park monitored alien transmissions from across the galaxy. Tactical officer Ryan Wells tracked every ship within 1,000 light years. Navigator Amy Thompson plotted courses through space that would let Rose appear anywhere without warning. Medical officer Ben Hughes made sure the crew could survive the incredible forces their own ship could create. They were all volunteers. Every person on Rose knew they might not survive what was coming. They also knew that humanity's future depended on what happened in the next few hours. The alert siren began to sound throughout the ship. On the main screen, 3 massive fleets appeared at the edge of the solar system. The Coalition had finally decided to end the human problem once and for all. Intelligence reports said they planned to destroy every human colony and turn Earth into a prison world. Jake counted the ships on his screen. 300 vessels, each one larger than anything humanity had built before Rose. The Vorthak ships looked like giant crystals that could slice through planets. The Zelen ships were organic things that seemed to be alive and hungry. The Arcturian ships were sleek metal daggers covered in weapons that could turn continents to glass. Admiral Sullivan moved to stand beside Jake. Her voice was calm when she spoke, but everyone on the bridge could hear the steel underneath her words. "Today we stop being victims," she said. "Today we show them what happens when you corner a species that refuses to die." The Coalition fleets were moving into attack formation. Their communications filled the space around Earth with demands for surrender. They wanted humanity to give up all their colonies, destroy their military, and accept permanent second-class status in the galaxy. In return, they promised not to kill everyone. Jake opened a channel to respond. His words would be heard on every alien ship in the system and recorded for history. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human warship Rose," he said. "You came here expecting to find the same weak species you have bullied for decades. You came here thinking we would beg for mercy like we have before. You were wrong." The Rose began to move. sliding out from behind Jupiter's moon like a predator leaving its hiding place. The alien ships immediately began targeting her, but their sensors could not get a solid lock. The quantum armor that covered Rose's hull absorbed energy and bent light, making her hard to see and impossible to predict. Jake could see the panic starting in the alien formations. They had expected to face human ships they understood, weapons they could counter, and tactics they could predict. Instead, they were looking at something that should not exist according to their understanding of physics. The Arcturian flagship Stellar Dominion powered up its main guns. Plasma beams that could melt mountains began charging in weapons arrays the size of city blocks. The Vorthak command ship Crystal Throne activated shields that had never been broken in 1,000 years of warfare. The Zelon mothership Living. Death began spawning fighter craft that moved like angry insects. But Jake was not worried. He looked at his crew and saw the same calm determination on every face. They had trained for this moment, prepared for this battle, and designed Rose to win this war. The aliens still thought they were fighting the old humanity, the species that begged for scraps and accepted whatever treatment they received. They were about to learn how much humans could change when their backs were against the wall. All stations. "Report ready," Lisa called out from her weapons station. "Quantum drives at full power," Alex reported from engineering. "All defensive systems online," Amy added from her navigation post. Jake nodded and turned to face the main screen. 300 alien warships were moving toward Earth, confident in their superiority and certain of their victory. They had made one critical mistake. They had given humanity time to prepare. "Begin Operation Dawn's End," Jake ordered. The Rose moved forward to meet the entire coalition fleet alone. The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than the surviving alien ships could carry it. On Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Coalition, emergency sessions convened in chambers that had not seen such panic in over 1,000 years. Ambassador Krill of the Vorthak Empire slammed his crystalline appendages against the council table, hard enough to crack the ancient stone surface. The Coalition Council had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia without serious challenge. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed smaller civilizations, and maintained perfect order through superior technology and overwhelming numbers. No single species had ever dared to stand against them alone, and certainly no primitive race from the Outer Rim had ever posed a real threat. Now they faced reports that seemed impossible to believe. A single human vessel had destroyed over half of their combined fleet. Weapons that could erase matter from existence. Defenses that absorbed the most powerful attacks without taking damage. Technology that broke fundamental laws of physics and made their own ships look like toys. President Carol Martinez of United Earth stood before the United Nations Assembly in New York, addressing not just humanity but the entire galaxy through quantum communication networks. Her words were being translated into thousands of languages and broadcast to every inhabited world within 100 light years. She spoke of the Kepler crisis, when 3 million humans had died from a disease that alien medicine could have cured easily. She described decades of trade restrictions that kept human colonies from accessing life-saving technology. She listed the times the coalition had refused to help when natural disasters struck human worlds, claiming it was not their responsibility to care for primitive species. "We tried to join your community as equals," President Martinez said, her voice carrying across space to alien ears that had never heard such defiance. "We offered friendship, cooperation, and mutual respect. You responded with contempt, restrictions, and indifference to our suffering. You taught us that strength is the only currency you understand." Jake Morrison guided Rose through hyperspace toward the core systems where the coalition maintained its greatest military bases. The massive warship moved through dimensions that existed only in quantum theory, making the journey between stars in minutes rather than months. Behind them, they left a trail of fear that was already changing the balance of power in the galaxy. Dr. Ben Hughes monitored coalition communications from his science station. The quantum receivers on Rose could intercept messages across vast distances and decode even the most heavily encrypted transmissions. What he heard made it clear that panic was spreading through alien governments like a plague. Several smaller species had already declared neutrality and withdrawn from coalition. Space, The peaceful Valdorian Republic had announced they wanted no part in a war against humanity. The merchant guilds that controlled interstellar trade were pressuring their governments to negotiate rather than fight. Economic markets were crashing, as investors realized that the coalition's military superiority was an illusion. But the three major powers were responding differently. The Vorthak Empire had begun mobilizing their reserve fleets and pulling ancient warships out of storage. The Zelon Collective was awakening hive queens that had slept for centuries, each one capable of spawning millions of warrior drones. The Arcturian Federation was accelerating secret weapons projects that had been deemed too dangerous to use. They were preparing to bring the full military might of their civilizations to bear against a single human ship. Intelligence reports suggested they were gathering over 10,000 vessels for a coordinated assault that would overwhelm even Rose's incredible defenses through sheer numbers. Admiral Kate Sullivan studied the tactical projections in her ready room aboard Rose. Even with their technological advantages, facing 10,000 ships simultaneously would push their capabilities to the limit. The quantum armor could absorb massive amounts of energy, but it had theoretical limits. The weapon systems could destroy hundreds of targets, but ammunition was not unlimited. She had spent her entire career studying alien military doctrine and understood how they thought. When faced with a superior opponent, they would try to drown it in bodies rather than develop new strategies or technologies. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten how to adapt or innovate. That would be their greatest mistake. Rose dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vorthak home system. The planet Crystallux hung in space like a jewel, its surface covered with living crystal cities that had grown for millions of years. It was the birthplace of the Vorthak civilization, and the most heavily defended system in their empire. Jake opened a communication channel to the planet below. His words would be heard by billions of Vorthak citizens and recorded for their historical archives. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human warship Rose," he announced. "We did not come here to conquer or destroy. We came to deliver a message that your government seems unable to understand through diplomatic channels." The response came from Emperor Zephyrix himself, the ancient crystalline being who had ruled the Vorthak Empire for over 50,000 years. His voice carried the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat or compromise. "Primitive mammals dare to threaten the heart of our empire," Zephyrix declared. "Our home defense fleet will reduce your pathetic vessel to cosmic debris. You will learn the price of challenging your betters." The Vorthak home defense fleet was indeed impressive. 200 of their most advanced warships formed protective formations around Crystallux. Each ship was a work of art as much as a weapon, grown from living crystal and powered by harmonics that could reshape matter at the molecular level. They had never been defeated in battle, and had destroyed entire civilizations with their combined might. Jake studied the alien fleet on his tactical displays and felt no fear. Rose had been designed specifically to face overwhelming odds and emerge victorious. Every system on the ship had been tested against simulations of exactly this scenario. "You have 1 hour to begin evacuating your civilian population," Jake broadcast to the planet below. "After that, we will demonstrate why threatening humanity's children is the last mistake your empire will ever make." The hour passed with frantic activity on Crystallux. Some civilians fled in transport ships while others retreated to underground shelters. The government refused to order a full evacuation, claiming it would show weakness to their enemies. Emperor Zephyrix declared that the human threat was a bluff and that their defenses were impregnable. When the hour ended, Jake gave the order that would change galactic history forever. "Lisa, activate the Stellar Cascade device." Engineer Lisa Beck had spent 3 years developing the theoretical framework for their most terrible weapon. The device could destabilize the fusion reactions in a star and create chain reactions that would tear apart entire solar systems. It had never been tested at full power, but computer simulations suggested it would work exactly as designed. A single beam of exotic particles shot out from Rose and struck the surface of Crystallux's sun. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The star continued burning as it had for billions of years, providing light and warmth to the worlds orbiting around it. Then the fluctuations began. The sun's surface started rippling with energy, patterns that had never been seen in nature. Gravitational waves pulsed outward at regular intervals, growing stronger with each cycle. The star was not going supernova, which would have been a quick death. Instead, it was beginning to collapse and expand rhythmically, creating tidal forces that no planetary system could survive. The Vorthak defense fleet found themselves caught between their desire to protect their homeworld and their need to escape the gravitational chaos consuming their solar system. Ships that had withstood the firepower of entire enemy fleets were torn apart by gravitational forces that changed direction and intensity without warning. Emperor Zephrix watched from his flagship as his empire's greatest achievement began to crumble around him. The crystal cities on Crystallix were cracking under tidal stresses that increased with every pulse from their dying star. Millions of years of architectural evolution were being reduced to rubble in a matter of hours. His final transmission was broadcast across the galaxy on all frequencies. "We surrender," the ancient emperor declared, his voice breaking with despair. "In the name of our ancestors and the memory of our civilization, we surrender. Call off your weapon and name your terms." But Jake Morrison's response echoed through space with the finality of a death sentence. "The cascade cannot be stopped once it begins. You had your chance to negotiate. You chose war instead." The Crystallux system became a monument to the price of underestimating humanity. Its star continued to pulse with unnatural rhythms, sending gravitational waves across the galaxy that served as a warning to any species that might consider repeating the Vorthak Empire's mistakes. Word of the system's destruction reached other coalition capitals within hours, carried by quantum communication networks that suddenly buzzed with surrender offers and diplomatic requests. The galaxy had learned a new truth. Humans did not make empty threats. The Arcturian flagship Stellar Dominion fired first, just as Jake Morrison had expected. 3 plasma beams brighter than small suns lanced across space toward Rose. Each beam carried enough energy to boil oceans and crack continents. The alien crews watching from hundreds of ships expected to see the human vessel vaporized in an instant. Instead, the beam struck Rose's hull and simply vanished. The quantum armor that Dr. Alex Carter had designed did not reflect the energy or absorb it in any normal way. The armor converted the plasma into pure quantum foam and scattered it across 17 dimensions that existed only in theory. From the outside, it looked like the most powerful weapons in the galaxy had done absolutely nothing. The silence on the Coalition communication channels lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then panic began to spread through the alien fleets like wildfire. Ship commanders who had been certain of victory suddenly found themselves staring at something that broke every rule they understood about warfare. Chief Weapons Officer Danny Park smiled as he activated Rose's primary weapon system. The molecular disruption cannon had taken Lisa Beck 12 years to design and build. It fired a beam of particles that convinced atoms they no longer wanted to stick together. The beam was invisible to most sensors and moved at nearly the speed of light. Danny aimed at the Stellar Dominion and pulled the trigger. The massive Arcturian flagship simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, bristling with weapons and carrying 10,000 crew members. The next moment there was only empty space where the ship had been. No explosion, no debris, no energy signature. The most powerful warship in the Arcturian fleet had been erased from reality as if it had never been built. The other alien ships began firing everything they had. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, gravity bombs, and quantum missiles filled the space around Rose like a deadly light show. The human ship moved through the barrage like it was dancing, her quantum drives allowing impossible turns and sudden direction changes that should have turned the crew into paste. Ryan Wells coordinated Rose's defensive systems from his tactical station. Point defense lasers tracked and destroyed incoming missiles before they could detonate. Gravity wave generators pushed away energy beams and sent them spinning off into empty space. Shield emitters created quantum barriers that made solid projectiles. Forget they were supposed to be solid. The Zelen Collective tried a different approach. Their ships began launching boarding pods filled with biomechanical drones designed to eat their way through any hull material. The pods struck Rose's armor and began releasing acid that could dissolve neutronium. The drones inside prepared to pour into the human ship and consume everything they found. They never got the chance. Medical Officer Ben Hughes had anticipated this tactic and prepared accordingly. The moment the alien pods made contact with Rose's hull, they were flooded with a tailored virus that targeted Zelon DNA specifically. The drones began dissolving from the inside out, their own biology turning against them as their cells forgot how to maintain cohesion. Amy Thompson piloted Rose through the alien formations with impossible skill. The massive ship moved like a fighter craft, diving between enemy vessels and using their own size against them. When Vorthak crystal ships tried to ram Rose with their diamond-hard hulls, Amy led them into collisions with their own allies. The result was spectacular explosions as crystalline warships shattered against each other like glass hitting concrete. Captain Morrison watched the battle unfold on his main screen with growing satisfaction. Every system on Rose was working exactly as designed. Every weapon performed beyond expectations. Every defense held against attacks that should have been overwhelming. The aliens had made their ships to fight other aliens using rules of warfare that had been followed for thousands of years. Humans had never been good at following rules. The Vorthak Empire tried to use their most feared tactic, the Crystal Storm. 50 of their ships formed a geometric pattern and began resonating at frequencies that could shatter planets. The harmonic waves they generated were designed to match the natural frequency of any material and tear it apart from within. It had never failed to destroy enemy vessels in the past. Rose absorbed the harmonic assault just like she had absorbed the plasma beams. The quantum armor converted the sound waves into exotic matter and used the energy to power the ship's own weapons. The attack that was meant to destroy Rose actually made her stronger. Danny Park returned the favor by firing the gravity pulse cannon at the center of the Vorthak formation. The weapon created a brief artificial black hole that lasted only a few seconds but generated gravitational forces that crushed 20 ships into balls of compressed matter. The remaining Vorthak vessels scattered in terror as they watched their most powerful weapons formation destroyed by a single shot. The battle had been raging for 2 hours, but to the alien crews it felt like days. They had started with 300 ships and numerical superiority that should have guaranteed victory. Now they had less than half that number and were no closer to damaging the human vessel than when the fight began. Admiral Kate Sullivan had been watching the battle from the observation deck, but now she returned to the bridge. Her expression was grim despite their success. She had fought aliens before and knew they would not give up easily. Desperate enemies often did desperate things. "Captain," she said to Jake, "long-range sensors are detecting quantum signatures. They're preparing to use prohibited weapons." Jake nodded. He had expected this moment. When faced with a threat they could not understand or defeat, the Coalition members would abandon their own laws about weapons of mass destruction. They would try to destroy Rose by destroying everything around her, including Earth itself. The Arcturian survivors activated their planet cracker, a weapon designed to split worlds in half. The Zelon ships began charging their Life Eater, a bioweapon that could sterilize entire star systems. The remaining Vorthak vessels started harmonizing for a stellar destabilization attack that would make Earth's sun go supernova. But Jake Morrison and the crew of Rose had prepared for this possibility too. They had known from the beginning that showing mercy to aliens would only be seen as weakness. The Coalition understood only one language: overwhelming force applied without hesitation or restraint. "All weapons target the planet killers," Jake ordered. "Fire everything we have." Rose unleashed her full arsenal for the first time. Molecular disruption cannons erased ships from existence. Gravity pulse weapons created black holes that swallowed entire squadrons. Quantum torpedo tubes fired projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously and could not be intercepted or defended against. The space around Earth became a graveyard as alien warships died by the dozens. The survivors of the Coalition fleet finally understood what they were facing: a human vessel that could destroy entire fleets single-handedly, and weapons technology that made their own seem like stone clubs. The remaining alien ships began retreating toward the edge of the solar system. Those that could still jump to hyperspace did so immediately. Others limped away on conventional drives, broadcasting surrender signals and begging for mercy. Jake allowed them to flee. The message had been delivered clearly enough. Humanity was no longer the weak species that begged for acceptance. They were now the apex predator in a galaxy full of prey animals that had forgotten what real danger looked like. As the last alien ship disappeared into hyperspace, the crew of Rose allowed themselves a moment of celebration. They had just defeated the combined military might of 3 galactic empires using a single vessel. It was a victory that would be remembered for millennia. But Admiral Sullivan was already planning the next phase of their campaign. The aliens would not accept this defeat quietly, and they would return with even larger fleets and more desperate tactics. The battle for Earth was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. Rose turned away from Earth and set course for alien space. It was time to carry the fight to those who had oppressed humanity for so long. The final coalition of alien species gathered at the edge of the galaxy, far from their homeworlds and the reach of normal space traffic. 12 different civilizations had contributed ships to this last desperate effort to stop humanity's rise to power. They had learned from the failures of the Vorthak and Zelen, bringing together technologies and tactics that had never been combined before in galactic history. Their fleet numbered over 15,000 vessels, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swarms of fighter craft. The hegemony contributed their reality-warping ships that could bend space and time. The synthesis provided vessels that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The ancient assembly brought warships that were older than human civilization and powered by technologies that modern science could barely understand. But their greatest weapon was not technological, it was psychological. They believed that Jake, Morrison and the crew of Rose would hesitate to commit genocide against multiple species at once. They counted on human morality to limit the effectiveness of their terrible weapons when faced with the potential extinction of billions of sentient beings. They were about to learn how much humanity had changed during their long struggle for acceptance. Rose appeared in the contested system without warning, her quantum drives allowing her to bypass the detection networks that the Allied fleet had established. The massive human warship materialized in the center of the enemy formation, like a predator appearing among a herd of prey animals. Jake Morrison looked at the tactical display showing thousands of enemy contacts surrounding his ship. Under normal circumstances, even Rose would have been overwhelmed by such numbers. But Jake had no intention of fighting a normal battle. "All stations report ready for Operation Final Dawn," he announced to his crew. Admiral Kate Sullivan had spent months planning this moment. She understood that winning this battle was not enough. They needed to win it so decisively that no species would ever again consider challenging human authority. The victory had to be so complete and terrifying that it would prevent future wars through pure intimidation. Dr. Alex Carter activated Rose's most advanced systems, technologies that had been theoretical until this moment. The quantum cascade, amplifiers began drawing power from the vacuum energy of space itself, tapping into the fundamental forces that held reality together. The dimensional phase. Cannons prepared to fire projectiles that would exist in 17 different universes simultaneously. The alien fleet opened fire first, unleashing weapons that could shatter planets and tear holes in the fabric of space-time. Energy beams that operated outside normal physics struck Rose's hull, and were absorbed by armor that had evolved beyond mere matter. Reality-warping attacks that should have erased the human ship from existence were deflected by shields that existed in mathematical dimensions rather than physical space. Lisa Beck unleashed Rose's full arsenal for the first time in the war. Every weapon system that had been designed, built, and tested in the hidden shipyards beyond Pluto fired simultaneously. The molecular disruption cannons erased entire squadrons from existence. The gravity pulse weapons created a chain of artificial black holes that swept through the enemy formation like a tide of destruction. But the new weapons were even more devastating. The dimensional phase cannons fired projectiles that struck targets in multiple realities at once, ensuring that destroyed ships could never be rebuilt or recovered. The quantum cascade amplifiers created chain reactions that turned enemy vessels into pure energy, which was then absorbed by Rose to power even more weapons. Danny Park coordinated the targeting systems with inhuman precision, guided by artificial intelligence that could process thousands of targets simultaneously. Every shot found its mark, every weapon achieved maximum efficiency, and every enemy response was anticipated and countered before it could be implemented. Amy Thompson piloted Rose through the enemy formation with movements that defied physics and common sense. The massive ship teleported through quantum foam, phased through solid matter, and attacked from directions that did not exist in normal space. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that could strike from anywhere while remaining impossible to hit in return. The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it ended, the space around the contested system was empty except for Rose and a few scattered particles that had once been the greatest military alliance in galactic history. 15,000 ships and their crews had been reduced to quantum, foam, and exotic radiation. But Jake Morrison was not finished. As the surviving alien governments watched through long-range sensors, Rose began the final demonstration of human power. The stellar engineering array activated for the first time, a weapon system so advanced that it required the energy output of an entire star to function. The system's primary star began to change, its nuclear fires reorganizing under the influence of quantum fields that operated according to human will rather than natural law. Within hours, the star had been converted into a perfect sphere of controlled fusion that would burn for billions of years while producing energy signatures that spelled out a message in 17 different alien languages. The message was simple: humanity will accept nothing less than equality. The transformation of an entire star into a cosmic monument to human power broke the will of every remaining alien government. Within days, surrender offers flooded Earth's communication networks. The Arcturian Federation formally dissolved itself and requested membership in whatever organization humanity chose to create. The remnants of the Vorthak Empire offered their complete technological databases as tribute. Dozens of smaller species begged for the privilege of serving under human leadership. President Carol Martinez addressed the galaxy from the Bridge of Rose, her words carried to every inhabited world within 1,000 light-years. She spoke not as a conqueror but as the leader of a species that had finally claimed its rightful place among the stars. "We did not seek this war," she declared. "We sought only the respect and equality that every sentient species deserves. You forced us to choose between submission and survival. We chose survival, and in doing so, we discovered capabilities we never knew we possessed." The new galactic order was established with humanity at its center, but not as tyrants. The Terran Federation welcomed any species willing to accept the principles of mutual respect, technological sharing, and cooperative exploration. Those who submitted completely were granted protection and full membership. Those who resisted faced the same fate as the coalition fleets. Admiral Sullivan became the first director of Galactic Peace, overseeing the integration of former enemy worlds into the new Federation. Her first act was to establish relief missions for planets that had suffered under coalition rule, using human medical technology and resources to heal the damage caused by millennia of oppression. Jake Morrison remained captain of Rose, but the great warship's mission had changed. No longer a weapon of war, she became the flagship of exploration fleets that pushed into unknown regions of the galaxy. The same technologies that had been designed for destruction were now used to protect peaceful species from the few remaining aggressive empires. Dr. Carter and his research teams began sharing their quantum discoveries with alien scientists, but under careful human supervision. The technologies that had made Rose possible would be used to benefit all species, but humanity would ensure they were never again used to oppress the weak or maintain unjust hierarchies. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in its history: that moral superiority meant nothing without the power to enforce it, and that a species pushed to the brink of extinction could develop capabilities that rewrote the fundamental rules of warfare and civilization. In the end, Rose continued her patrol of the peaceful trade routes between human and alien worlds, a dark guardian ensuring that the galaxy never forgot the price of underestimating humanity. The warship that had begun as an instrument of revenge had become a symbol of protection for any species willing to embrace the principles of equality and mutual respect. The universe was vast and full of wonders still to be discovered. But now humanity explored it, not as supplicants begging for scraps of knowledge, but as equals among the stars who had earned their place through courage, determination, and the absolute refusal to accept anything less than the respect they deserved. The age of coalition dominance was over. The age of human leadership had begun. And across the galaxy, civilizations that had ruled for millions of years learned to bow before the species from Sol that had refused to kneel even when all hope seemed lost. The destruction of the Vorthak home system sent shockwaves through the galaxy that were felt far beyond the physical gravitational pulses emanating from the dying star. Within 12 hours of Crystallux's fall, the Arcturian Federation transmitted an emergency ceasefire request on all diplomatic frequencies. The Zellan Collective recalled their invasion fleets to defend their core worlds. Smaller species that had never dared to oppose the coalition began sending secret messages to Earth, seeking to establish peaceful relations before humanity's wrath turned toward them. Jake Morrison stood on Rose's observation deck watching the twisted remains of what had once been the Vorthak Empire's crown jewel. The star still pulsed with unnatural rhythms, its gravitational waves creating aurora effects. In the upper atmospheres of the system's outer planets, it was beautiful in a terrible way, like watching the death of a god. Dr. Alex Carter joined him at the viewing window, his face reflecting the mixed emotions that the entire crew was feeling. They had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history, forcing the surrender of an entire civilization through the actions of a single ship. But the cost in alien lives had been staggering, and the responsibility for that destruction would follow them forever. The cascade effect is stabilizing, Alex reported. The star should maintain its current pattern for approximately 50,000 years before finally collapsing completely. Any ships that try to enter the system will be torn apart by the gravitational anomalies. Jake nodded, his expression grim. They had created a graveyard that would serve as a monument to their victory and a warning to their enemies. The message was clear. Humanity would no longer accept subjugation or second-class treatment regardless of the cost. Admiral Kate Sullivan approached them, carrying reports from across the galaxy. Her intelligence network had expanded dramatically, as species that had been neutral or hostile suddenly became very interested in sharing information with humanity. Fear was a powerful motivator for cooperation. The Coalition Council is fragmenting, she reported. 17 species have withdrawn from the alliance in the past day. The Valdorian Republic has offered to mediate peace negotiations. Even some Arcturian colonies are declaring independence and requesting human protection. But Jake knew the war was far from over. The three major powers still controlled massive military forces, and desperate enemies often made dangerous choices. Intelligence reports suggested that secret weapons projects across the galaxy were being accelerated, with scientists working around the clock to develop countermeasures for human technology. The first real test came when Rose arrived at the edge of Arcturian space. Prime Minister Valdris himself met them aboard a diplomatic vessel, surrounded by an escort fleet that maintained careful distance from the human warship. The Arcturian leader was an impressive figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with skin that shifted color according to his emotional state. Right now, that skin was displaying the deep blue patterns that indicated profound fear. Valdris had brought gifts, data crystals containing Arcturian medical technology, manufacturing techniques, and scientific discoveries that could benefit human colonies for generations. His offer was simple: complete technological sharing in exchange for a guarantee that humanity would not use the stellar cascade device against Arcturian worlds. Jake listened to the proposal with interest but made no commitments. The time for half measures and conditional agreements had passed. Humanity would accept nothing less than complete equality in galactic affairs, with full access to trade routes, technology, and resources that had been denied to them for decades. The negotiations were interrupted by an emergency alert from Rose's tactical systems. Ryan Wells reported massive fleet movements in the Zellan systems, with bioships converging from across their territory. The collective had made their decision. Rather than surrender like the Vorthak, they would attempt to overwhelm Rose through sheer numbers. The Xelon force that emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything seen before in galactic warfare. Over 8,000 bioships of various sizes filled the space around Rose, each one grown rather than built and capable of self-repair and adaptation. The largest vessels were living creatures the size of small moons, their hulls pulsing with organic weapons that could convert matter into aggressive biological agents. But the collective had made a critical error in their understanding of human psychology. They assumed that Rose's crew would be horrified by fighting living opponents and would hesitate to cause mass extinction of sentient beings. They failed to realize that humans had already crossed that line when they destroyed the Vorthak homeworld. The battle that followed redefined the concept of one-sided warfare. Rose moved through the Xelon formations like a shark among minnows, her quantum drives allowing impossible maneuvers that let her attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The molecular disruption cannons proved especially effective against biological targets, causing entire ships to dissolve as their cellular structure forgot how to maintain cohesion. Danny Park coordinated the weapons fire with artistic precision, targeting the command nodes that coordinated each bioship cluster. When the control organisms died, their subordinate vessels became confused and began attacking each other, mistaking allied ships for enemies in their biological panic. The Xelon collective tried to adapt, growing new defensive measures and biological weapons in real time as the battle progressed. But human technology was advancing even faster. Lisa Beck made modifications to Rose's weapons systems during combat, creating new ammunition types specifically designed to counter each collective adaptation. Amy Thompson piloted Rose through formations of living ships that tried to engulf her in digestive acids and parasitic organisms. The quantum armor proved immune to biological attack, converting organic weapons into harmless energy that actually powered Rose's defensive systems. The harder the collective tried to adapt, the stronger Rose became. The turning point came when Ben Hughes detected the location of the Queen Mother, the central intelligence that coordinated all Xelon activities in the region. The massive creature was hidden in the center of the fleet, protected by thousands of escort vessels and layers of biological shields that had never been penetrated. Jake made the decision to use Rose's most powerful weapon for the second time. The gravity pulse cannon charged to maximum power, drawing energy from the ship's quantum reactors and the ambient gravitational fields of nearby planets. When it fired, the artificial black hole that formed was larger and longer lasting than any they had created before. The Queen Mother and her entire escort fleet were crushed into a singularity that existed for nearly 30 seconds before evaporating into Hawking radiation. The death of their central intelligence caused a cascade failure throughout the collective fleet. Bioships that had fought with coordinated precision suddenly became individual organisms fighting for survival. Most of the surviving Xelon vessels attempted to flee, but Rose hunted them down systematically. Jake had learned from the Vorthak encounter that showing mercy only encouraged future aggression. The collective would either surrender completely or face total extinction. The few Xelon ships that escaped carried a simple message to their remaining queens: submit to human authority, or watch their species disappear from the galaxy entirely. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, and no second chances. As Rose surveyed the debris field where the collective fleet had died, communications began arriving from across the galaxy. The Arcturian Federation formally requested peace, negotiations. The remnants of the Vorthak Empire offered their complete surrender and submission. Dozens of minor species begged for human protection against other coalition members who might blame them for the Empire's collapse. Admiral Sullivan coordinated the flood of diplomatic messages while Jake considered their next move. 2 of the 3 major powers had been broken, but the galaxy still contained millions of species and thousands of governments. Creating a lasting peace would require more than military victory. It would require building a new order based on human principles of equality and mutual respect. But first, they needed to deal with the remaining coalition hardliners who still believed they could resist humanity's rise to power. Intelligence reports suggested that several species were combining their remaining forces for a final desperate assault, convinced that overwhelming numbers could still defeat Rose's advanced technology. Jake looked at the tactical displays showing enemy fleet movements across dozens of star systems. The aliens still did not understand what they were truly fighting. Rose was not just a warship. She was the herald of a new age where humanity would never again kneel before those who mistook technological superiority for natural authority. The final battle was coming, and Jake intended to make it so decisive that no species in the galaxy would ever again question humanity's right to stand as equals among the stars.